Now, this reveal that I'm going to bring to you is one part crazy, right? But also genius at the same time. And it's just straight up diabolical, right? So the way this works is that on Earth, in this reality, due to the machinations and the manipulations of the Maker, everybody in this room is a villain, but no one's a villain at the same time, right? The response of the Hulk is, I promise you, Mr. Stark, however it might appear to the world at large, there are no enemies in this room. The response of Howard is, I think you're forgetting the Eastern conflict and that event in the Pacific. What about the winter apocalypse? I could go on. Ask any man on the street and they would disagree, as would history, as would I. And the response of the legendary Hulk is, that is the world as you know it. Look around this place and you will see that there are 7 major territories represented. And though we have not yet fully circled this sun, when our time has come, each of our nations will play the quote-unquote adversary just as the Rasputins do now. While inside our non-adversarial nations, we rally our citizens against this great evil and all participate in whatever pageantry is required. Then, at the end of a generation, another territory, one that has spent the previous age becoming more and more belligerent, assumes the quote-unquote rogue state mantle, while the previous one engages in a generation of performative regret. It is amazing, like this, just the sheer scale of this. The general human population has no idea that this is happening. They have no idea it's going on, right? The territory of the Rasputins are bad guys. Why are they bad guys? Because they do terrible and awful things and so on and so forth, right? But then like the world unites against them and the Rasputins are defeated. And then the Rasputins kind of spend all this time, my God, we did such terrible things. We did such awful things. But then suddenly the entire territory of the Hulk becomes evil, right? And they've been becoming evil for quite some time. And they in turn are the ones that the world rallies against. And while humanity is jumping from one foot to the next, these guys are just maintaining control. It's all theater. It's all a show. And what's so crazy about this is looking at the world right now doesn't really seem impossible. So it's a really phenomenal thing because when Howard Stark hears this, it blows his mind. Just the level of diabolical, just the level of manipulation, right? This is like one of the most diabolical things that this guy's ever heard of. The entirety of the human population is being manipulated by the people in this room. But what Legendary Hulk does is he answers the question of why they would even do that in the first place. And the response comes both by way of Emmanuel DaCosta as well as Legendary Hulk himself, right? The response is the problem has been studied. The Maker did several iterations of experimental societies inside the city. He has shown us the results. Peace achieved through coercion or enforced is never successful for a long-term strategy. The truth is, humanity is incapable of accepting peace. Now, the Hulk follows up and says, to be fair, not all of us agree with such universal assumptions, Mr. Stark. I believe that some people, many even, are capable of achieving a state of inner calm that presents as peace. I have to believe it. I've devoted my life to it, but most are incapable of maintaining that state in perpetuity. They can't handle the quiet. They can't let their action be inaction. They can't maintain serenity with all the hysterical babbling that surrounds them. So literally, the entire argument here is that humanity needs war. Right now, it may just simply be that in the here and now, humanity is pretty primitive, right? For all the advancements in technology and stuff like that, our brain is still kind of dumb, right? It hasn't quite caught up with like humanity in its current form. It still functions from decades ago, right? The whole idea of fight or flight, right? 2 cavemen are walking along the road and they both hear rustling in the bushes. The one who ran away lived longer than the one who went to go investigate. You know what I mean? It's that kind of a thing, right? So with all of that in mind and realizing that the nature of humanity is to wage war, it is to fight. If things stay restless for too long, humanity will self-destruct. Then ultimately they had to create this whole sense of theater in order to bring peace to what is basically a world that's incapable of doing it on its own. So it's really, really genius, right? It's really cool. And if I were a guy who was running the world, this is exactly what I would do, right? It's just this really genius thing. But then you ultimately have Hulk who says, I wish it wasn't true. But then the response of the Maker who shows up and says, it is. And it always has been. And he says, of course, focusing on shortcomings of mankind's nature makes it easier for those in this room to gloss over the other major reason we do this. The little people hate us. We giants who rule the land. It's not how it used to be in the ages gone by. Back then, it wouldn't have mattered, right? The powerful would have just rolled right over the powerless if need be. But what he says is this is why it's necessary to give them something else to focus on, which we have gotten very good at doing. So it's really, really interesting, right? Like literally they're just manufacturing conflict. They're creating reasons for humanity to be upset because humanity needs to be upset. So it's a very, very cynical perspective of human nature, but the Maker being what he is and basically creating the city, which is a giant dome where time passes differently and he can effectively create entire crops of societies. This is what he's come to realize. It's very similar to the Matrix, right? Like the motivation behind the nature of the Matrix. So the question that Howard Stark has is, if all of this, right, this well choreographed dance of yours is to keep the people happy so that we can get on with the important work of what giants do you mind telling me what the real work is?